Chair, entertain a motion to come out of executive session. Got a motion to come out of executive session. It's been, can I get a second? It's been properly second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. We're now out of executive session. There was no actions taken in executive session. And that concludes our report from the attorney. All right, thank you. Next, we have citizens' input for items on the agenda not requiring a public hearing. There's no one signed up to speak. Next, we have the report of the county administrator. We have no report. Thank you, Mr. Seals. Next, we have the report of the clerk of council, Ms. Olam.
Yes, sir. I just have two reminders. The first is the coroner's office dedication, which is July the 14th at 4 p.m. He's asking that all council participate if possible. And then we have a special call meeting on July the 26th to wrap up. And I'll be sending out a calendar invite on that. That completes my report.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Only. Next, we have the report of the chairman. It's only one personnel item, and that on the July 26th meeting date, there's been some discussion about having a meeting with the interim county administrator. I'll send out, we plan to do it since council will be here on the 26th. I'll send out a time for that meeting where the interim requests to meet, do a 30-day meeting with council members. And that concludes my report. Next, we have open and close of public hearings. Item 14A, an ordinance amending the fiscal year 2016-17 general fund annual budget to appropriate up to $340,000 of general fund balance to be used as initial funding for projects related to flood recovery. Funds used will be reimbursed as federal, state, or as funding is provided to the county on a reimbursable basis. That public hearing is open. No one signed up to speak. That public hearing is now closed.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
is this the amount we approved of before, talked about before? Is this the same amount? I thought it was less than this.
I think so.
Wasn't it less
Same
than
amount. They're saying-
It wasn't 340,000. I mean, whatever I'm seeing here.
They're saying it's the same amount.
It's the same? All right, thank you.
Okay. Next, we have item 14B, an ordinance amending the Richland County Code of Ordinance, Chapter 2, Administration, Article 10, Purchasing, Division 7, Small Local Business Enterprise Procurement Requirements, Section 2-644, Affirmative Procurement Initiatives for Enhancing SLBE and Emerging SLBE Contract Participation, subparagraph 5, so as to increase the contract value for shelter markets. That public hearing is open. There's no one signed up to speak. That public hearing is now closed. Next, we have approval of consent items, item 15 through 23. No, I'm sorry, through 27. Chair, entertain a motion.
Move for approve, second.
Got a motion for approval. It's been properly second. Mr. Malinowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to remove items 26 and 27.
Okay. Chair, entertain a motion for the.
Approval of the remaining items.
Okay,
Second.
got a motion for approval of the remaining items, items 15 through 25.
Remaining consent items, right?
Consent items.
Consent.
Yes, sir. Any more discussion? All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Item 26, Mr. Malinowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Page 64, I would just like clarification because this says a committee recommended that staff be directed to determine the legal basis for the City of Columbia ordinance about their sidewalk maintenance and subsequently negotiate a memorandum of understanding to include the level of responsibility council is willing to accept for this property. I think we're going a little further than we need to. I think we first need to determine if, in fact, there is any responsibility, who's responsible for this sidewalk area that we're talking about. And if it's determined the county does have some, then we can go back and find out what we should accept in an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding. But until then, I don't think we should have that as part of the recommendation. It should be to direct staff to determine the legal basis for who owns that property. So I think that's what I would like to see.
So your motion is?
My motion is to have staff determine the legal basis for who's responsible for that particular property out there.
Okay, that's the motion on the table. And it dies for lack of second. Mr. Livingston.
No, I was going to speak to the motion had it been second.
Okay.
It was second?
No, it wasn't.
No.
Okay.
Chair entertain a motion.
Move approval of the item as recommended by the committee.
Got a motion for approval. It's been
Second.
properly second. Any discussion? All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Item 27, Mr. Malinowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't want to prolong the meeting. I just don't believe that legally that we're on solid ground on this one, and for that reason, I'll vote no. That's all.
Okay.
Number 27.
From 27, Chair entertain a motion.
Motion on the table from the committee is for approval.
Got a motion for approval.
Oh, the spending.
It's been properly second.
By the committee.
It's been properly second. Discussion. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
That motion carries. Next, we have the report of the Development and Service Committee. Ms. Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item number 28, City of Columbia request for easement that's on Decker Boulevard. Committee is recommending approval.
You heard the committee's recommendation for approval. Discussion. Mr. Malinowski.
Yeah, I would just like to know why on page 80, there's a letter from the City of Columbia Department of Utilities and Engineering. It says it's the second attempt for this particular request on it. And I'm wondering why there's a second attempt, why we didn't answer the county the first attempt, unless it has to do with the fact that in there it says to whom it may concern. I find it difficult to believe that the city doesn't know who to address this to in the county, but that's how it's worded here.
It could be a new employee, and they have
Well,
not
let's
quite
find out
acquainted
here.
to who is at the county.
Okay, one moment. Mr. Malinowski, you stay on the floor.
Thank you. I just want to know why we got a second attempt and didn't handle the first one.
Yes, Warren Harley, Assistant County Administrator. Mr. Malinowski, unfortunately, you are correct. I think what actually happened is the first letter came to us, but I'm not sure where it landed. I got a call from the city, and then they resent another letter directly to me, so we got it through.
Is that directly to you?
Yes, sir.
So you're to whom it may concern. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Malinowski. Any more discussion? Any more discussion? The motion on the table is for approval. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Ms. Dixon.
That concludes the report for Development and Service Committee.
Thank you, Ms. Dixon. Next, we have the report of the Administration and Finance Committee. Mr. Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We do have three items before you tonight. Item number 29 is a council motion regarding the development of a business license ordinance for hospice agencies. The committee recommended the council approve certain fees from the coroner. However, the staff is requesting a deferral on this item for one meeting until the September meeting.
I'll second it.
Thank you.
Okay, that's the motion for deferral. It's been properly second. Deferral is non-debatable. All in favor of deferral signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Mr. Pierce.
Item 30 has to do with a community development allocation of home funds to the Columbia Housing Authority. What they're requesting here is for us to partner with Columbia to provide $200,000 of our funds to help construct 6 new scattered site housing of units of affordable housing. The committee did recommend this allocation, but it was not unanimous.
Okay,
The
got it.
recommendation is for approval.
Okay, the committee's recommendation is for approval. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Ms.
I had serious opposition to this particular one. The reason it didn't get on the consent item because I still have a lot of concerns, but I did have the opportunity to speak with Ms. Jackson at length, and she assured me that this is a good project to put my money into, so I'm going to approve it.
Okay. All right, thank you, Ms. Dickerson. Any more discussion? All in favor of that recommendation signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Mr. Pierce.
The last item we have is the Conservation Department and their purchase of the Upper Mill Creek tract. And as you know, we have already purchased a large portion of this tract. There's a map in your material tonight. The issue that was questionable on this, the Conservation Commission wanted to originally borrow the money from the general fund, and they would then pay it back. Then a recommendation was made by the administration that the money be taken from the hospitality tax fund and not paid back. And then that changed to the hospitality tax and pay it back. And the entire issue got very confusing. We forwarded it without recommendation. To give you an update, the staff is recommending that for a variety of financial reasons, that's my understanding, Mr. Driggers is here, he can speak to this if you want to, that the recommendation is from the staff that the Conservation Commission be permitted to borrow the money from the general fund, not hospitality tax, and that they will be paying the money back to the general fund
Okay,
to
that's
purchase the Mill Creek. All right. That is the recommendation of the staff, and that would require a motion, which I guess I can make. I will make that on behalf of the staff. If there's a second.
Okay, that's the motion on the table. It's been properly seconded. That's coming out of committee? The only
Well, it
change
came out
was
without
the-
a recommendation,
Okay.
and I'm now making this.
Okay. Okay, the motion is for approval,
Of permitting the Conservation Commission to borrow the money to purchase the Upper Mill Creek tract from the general fund, but they will be paying the money back.
okay? That's the motion. It's been properly seconded. Mr. Livingston.
This is one reading item.
And yes, sir, and it's time sensitive, so if it were to pass, I would be offering a motion to reconsider it.
okay.
And what's the plan? What's the payback plan?
Mr., who's going to speak to this?
Since it's one reading, I'm sorry, I got to ask 3 questions.
That's fine, fine. Mr. Epps?
Is we will take a large down payment from our fund balance, from the commission fund balance, and then we'll pay the rest of it back annually out of our budget over the next 15 to 17 years.
From the millions that you get annually.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Just guaranteed.
All right, thank you.
So, okay. So we will attach this to their budget every,
Yeah.
that's a long payback. Good gracious.
It's like doing their own bond, I guess.
I hope we don't forget, Mr. Malinowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Whether they borrow it and pay it back or not, it seems to me like the Conservation Commission here is overstepping their actual mission and authority. Under the purpose, it says it's for mitigation, conservation, which is correct, and tourism development purposes. I didn't realize that the Conservation Commission was into tourism development purposes. You indicate you're selecting a contractor that's going to establish a nature-based recreation and tourism. Now you've gone over to recreation as well. And on another area over here, you say that you're maximizing the economic development opportunities. Well, has anybody run this by our economic development director to find out if it really does have any economic development possibilities? I mean, this seems to me like we'd be allowing the Hospitality Tax Committee to borrow from your account, the Conservation Commission, in order for them to buy land that they think's a good opportunity to develop that will bring us more H-tax in. Or maybe have the Planning Commission bring us a whole bunch of parcels of property to rezone general commercial because they think it's good to bring more business into the county. Your mission is to promote the protection of natural, historical, and cultural resources throughout Richland County by negotiating voluntary protection strategies with landowners through such means as conservation easements, land acquisition, and grant programs. It has nothing to do with tourism development. And for that reason, I cannot support this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Malinowski. Mr. Livingston.
You know, I think this does fit with their mission, but I think what they're saying, at least in my opinion, is that these are just some consequences that resulting from their mission
Got Jackson.
that are positive for the county. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Livingston. Mr. Jackson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I understand what my colleague to the right is saying, but at the same time, it doesn't say you cannot. I mean, if for conservation purpose, you have a property and it can be used for the benefit, and it will bring some tourism, it will bring some economic development, just like we have Cook's Mountain. People coming from all over, you bring in tourism, right? It's the conservation piece, right? So it has special or certain benefits that will follow it. That doesn't necessarily in your mission, but it applies. So I would not like to say, well, you can only use conservation, no tourism, no economic development, that's it. I mean, it would be limiting ourselves. So, I mean, I'd applaud you that you get in this property, and it will have that type of impact to the community. It will help us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jackson. Mr. Manning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to agree with my colleague, Councilman Jackson, in terms of applauding the group. One of the things that I think too often we do is we get into silos that these people do economic development, these people do conservation, these people do hospitality and recreation. And I think that any time that we as a county can find an opportunity to break out of the silos and do things to where people work together are the kind of things that the public looks for us to do. So I would commend that aspect. However, I do have a question. If we're coming into the loan business, is there any cost accounting that's been figured into this to where, I don't want to look at it in terms of fees or interest, but at the same time, I do believe there's going to be some work done through our finance office that has never been done before that will be asked of them to do to keep up with the loan and, to get the payments in and all that. And I mean, I do think, again, out of the silos, that there ought to be some consideration of some bit of funding that's accounted for, like I say, in the sense of cost accounting, for us to do that. Because if we get creative and look to do this again, if all of a sudden, and again, I'm totally in favor of it. I'm just thinking for the people in finance, this does become, what we get upset with the legislature doing unfunded mandates, in a sense, with no funding out of the conservation funds that are borrowing money from the finance department, and the finance department has to keep up and deal with all that there ought to be, or I'm asking, was there any consideration to some element of funding from the conservation folks or out of their budget into the finance department to take care of that additional responsibility? And I apologize, I wasn't at the meeting to ask that question there, but I assume it was.
I'm going to have to refer to Daniel, to Mr. Driggers, if he can.
Can you,
Yes, it was
Daniel,
discussed,
can you
and
state
it's
your
in the
name?
plan.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The answer is yes.
Could
It
you
was,
state your name and position?
Daniel Driggers, Finance. When we met and talked about it, we talked about both the cost allocation and the interest cost. Because the reality is the Conservation Commission will be saving some money for the county because we're not going to the external market. And so that is included in this plan.
Oh, beautiful. I love it when a plan already came through. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Manning. Mr. Dickerson.
That was a part of my, because I was asking about the interest rates and fees and all of those kinds of things, so that answered my question. Thank you, Mr. Driggers. But I do have one thing. I do think that the conservation and this particular project will be able to fuel tourism. I think that's what a lot of our businesses are, that some of our conservative buildings that we have, they do draw tourism to this county, because that's one of the big things I'm going to be doing this fall. But that is a great thing, so I support it fully. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Driggers, for answering my question.
All right, thank you, Mr. Dickerson. Mr. Malinowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just add that I'm not against bringing tourism either, and I agree with Mr. Jackson, Mr. Manning. It doesn't hurt to break out of the silo. However, if everybody starts doing this without input from the other silo partners, which is what I see here, I haven't seen any input requested from the other entities that normally handle those matters, and that's what I think we should have had. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Malinowski. Any more discussion? Okay, the motion on the table is
Approval.
for approval.
Of borrowing the money from the general fund and paying it back from the
Okay,
general fund.
All right, and this is one reading item. All in favor of that motion signify by raising your hand.
In favor, Rose, Dixon, Jackson, Pierce, Rush, Livingston, Dickerson, Manning, Jeter.
Any opposed, like sign?
Opposed, Malinowski.
Mr. Chairman, I move for reconsideration.
Got a
Second.
motion for reconsideration. It's been properly second. Any discussion? All in favor of reconsideration signify by saying aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
That motion fails. Mr. Pierce.
I believe that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Pierce. Next, we have the report of the Rules and Appointments Committee. Mr. Malinowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Items number 32A through H, the committee recommends to advertise or re-advertise those vacancies, whichever the case may be.
Okay, you heard the committee's recommendation. All in favor, any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Mr. Malinowski.
Item number 33, Employee Grievance Committee, one vacancy. The committee unanimously recommends to appoint Tanika N. Leggett.
Okay, you heard the committee's recommendation. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Mr. Malinowski.
Item number 34, Community Relations Council. The committee unanimously recommends to re-advertise for that position.
Okay, you heard the committee's recommendation. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Mr. Malinowski.
Item number 35, Hospitality Tax Committee. The committee unanimously recommends to appoint it's actually reappoint Mr. Charles Aiken.
Okay, you heard the committee's recommendation. Any discussion? All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Mr. Malinowski.
Item number 36 is being held in committee for legal to draft new language that will address this issue and be provided to us at our next meeting in September. And Mr. Chair, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Malinowski. Next, we have other items. Item 37, a resolution to appoint and commission Caleb C. McBride as Code Enforcement Officer for the proper security, general welfare, and convenience of Richland County Vector Control.
Move approval.
Got a motion for approval. It's been properly second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Next, we have citizens input. Almost there, almost there. Next, we have citizens input.
No one signed up to speak.
Must pertain to items not on the agenda.
No one signed up to speak.
There's no one signed up to speak.
Wow.
Was there?
Continuation.
He's not here. Let's go.
Okay. Next, we have executive session. No, one moment. Can we state what items for executive session?
Mr. Chairman, this would be item 9B, the DHEC appeal solid waste permit, and the item 13, I guess, personnel matter off.
No, we already.
No, we already
discussed
covered that?
Yeah.
Then just the 9B DHEC appeal.
Okay. All right, Chair, entertain a motion. Got a motion for executive session. It's been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? We're in executive session.
I think once we got it clarified, find out.